My three eyes locked onto the humans the moment they stepped through the outer arch, and every muscle in my thorax went cold. I had watched hundreds of delegations enter the conquered council chambers. I had seen warlords from the outer rim stride in with blades longer than my body. I had seen the Krell generals carry weapons that could melt a starship hull. I had seen the Visari whipmasters, the Drathan gunners, the armored giants from the Orion belt. Every single species walked into that chamber carrying the pride of their people on their belts, their shoulders, their spines. It was law. It was tradition. It was the oldest rule written into the conquered charter. But the three humans walked in with nothing. Not a knife, not a pistol, not even a ceremonial blade tucked into a sleeve. They wore simple dark clothing, the kind you might see on a merchant or a teacher. One woman, two men. They did not look dangerous. They did not look proud. They did not look like anything at all, really. And that was what made my breathing plates lock up in my chest. Because the Sergeant at Arms stepped aside for them. You have to understand what that meant. The Sergeant at Arms was a Krell named Voron, and Voron had once stopped a fully armored ambassador from the Threshan Empire at the door and forced him to surrender a hidden blade before entering. Voron had disarmed beings twice his size. Voron did not step aside for anyone. Voron did not lower his head for anyone. Voron was the rule. And yet there he stood, his massive armored shoulders angled slightly back, his gaze fixed on the floor as the three humans walked past him without even slowing down. He did not scan them. He did not challenge them. He did not even look at them. I turned to my supervisor, an older headherron named Melnick, and I whispered the question before I could stop myself. Why are they not being checked? Melnick's antennae flattened against his skull so fast I heard them click. In my species, that gesture means fear, not caution, not concern. Fear, deep, ancient, instinctive fear. I had never seen Melnick make that gesture in all the years I had served under him. Do not ask that question, he said, his voice low and tight. But the law requires. The law does not apply to them. I wanted to press further. I wanted to pull out my protocol tablet and show him the exact section of the charter that required weapon inspection of every delegate, no exceptions, no species privileges. But Melnick's antennae were still flat, and his three eyes were darting toward the humans with a nervous rhythm I had never seen in him before. So I stayed quiet. I pretended to take notes. I watched. The humans took their seats at the long, curved table. They did not speak to each other. They did not look around the chamber. They sat, folded their hands in front of them, and waited. Around them, the other delegates were behaving strangely. The Krell general, who normally sat with his chest puffed out and his plasma halberd across his lap, had placed his weapon on the floor beside his chair and was staring very carefully at his own hands. The Visari speaker, who loved nothing more than making dramatic hand gestures during debates, was sitting perfectly still. The Drathan delegation, all 6 of them, had angled their chairs a few degrees away from the human seats. Not obviously. Just enough that they were not quite facing them directly. Every single species in that room was avoiding the humans, not with hostility, not with suspicion, with something much worse. With deference. I scribbled notes on my tablet as fast as my claws could move. This was not right. This was not in any of the training materials I had studied for 2 years before taking this position. The Conquered was built on the principle of equality between species. Every delegate was supposed to be treated the same, every weapon logged, every protocol followed. The whole point of the council was that no species stood above another. And yet here, in front of me, an entire chamber of the most powerful beings in the galaxy was quietly, carefully, politely refusing to make eye contact with 3 unarmed humans in plain clothing. The session began. The speaker called for opening statements. Delegates rose one by one to present their positions on the quarterly trade accords. The humans remained seated. When their turn came, the woman stood, said 11 words about supporting the current framework, and sat back down. The entire chamber released a breath I had not realized they were holding. After the session, I followed Melnick back to our office. I waited until the door sealed behind us. Then I asked again, "Melnick, please, I need to understand." He sat down heavily behind his desk. His antennae were no longer flat, but they were drooping, which in my species means exhaustion. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something that chilled me to the core of my shell. "Young one, listen to me very carefully. In this job you will see many strange things. You will see alliances form and break. You will see wars begin over a single misspoken word. You will see species rise and species fall. But there is one thing you must never, ever do." "What?" I asked. "Never ask a human why they carry no weapons. And never, ever try to find out what happened before they joined the council." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because if you ask, they might answer. And once you know, you cannot unknow it. And the knowing is the thing that breaks you." He turned to his screen then and began working, and I understood the conversation was over. But I could not let it go. I walked back to my quarters that night and I could not eat. I could not rest. I kept seeing the image of Voron stepping aside, his eyes on the floor. I kept hearing the silence in the chamber when the human woman stood up. I kept feeling that strange pressure in the air, like the moment before a storm, like the moment before something very old and very patient decides to move. I am a protocol officer. I document things. That is my function. That is my purpose. I had taken an oath when I joined the Concord service, and that oath was to the truth, to the record, to the honest keeping of history. And something was missing from the record. I sat down at my personal terminal and I began to search. I pulled up the founding documents of the Council. I pulled up the admission treaties of every member species. I read through them in the order they had joined, one by one, checking the protocols, the ceremonies, the weapon declarations. Every species had a weapon declaration on file, every species except one. Humanity's admission file was 140 standard years old. It was supposed to contain their cultural profile, their technological assessment, their weapon traditions, their military doctrine, and the standard diplomatic agreements signed during their entry into the Council. When I opened the file, almost every page was blacked out. Not redacted in the normal way, with small sections hidden for security reasons. The entire file was redacted, whole pages of solid black, appendices removed, annexes sealed. Where there should have been hundreds of pages of information, there were only 3 visible lines at the very top of the document. Those 3 lines read, "Admission granted by unanimous vote, terms accepted without discussion, no further records to be made public by order of the full Council." I sat back from the screen. My heart was beating too fast. A unanimous vote, every species in the Council voting together to seal humanity's file. That had happened exactly twice in the history of the Concord. Once for an event called the Dark Compact, which was so terrible that even its name was only a placeholder because the real name had been erased. And once, apparently, for the admission of the humans. What had they done? What had they done that was so significant, so serious, so impossible to speak about, that every species in the galaxy had agreed to bury it forever? I thought about Melnick's warning. I thought about Voron stepping aside. I thought about the woman standing up and saying 11 words and sitting back down while an entire chamber of warlords and generals held their breath. I should have stopped. I should have closed the terminal, gone to bed, and forgotten everything I had seen. That would have been the safe thing to do, the smart thing to do. But I am a protocol officer. I document things. I began my search in earnest that night. I did not know then that the search would take me to a dying diplomat in a forgotten hospice, to a sealed archive in the lower levels of Concord Station, and finally, to a planet that the galaxy had agreed, by unanimous vote, to never visit again. And at the end of it, I would sit across from a small human woman drinking tea, and I would understand why the humans walked into the council unarmed. And I would understand why no one else ever would. The first place I went was the senior diplomatic registry. Every retired ambassador who had ever served on the council had their records filed there, including their contact information for post-service consultation. I was not supposed to access those records without authorization from a senior officer, but my position as a protocol officer gave me clearance to verify attendance records for historical sessions. That was enough to get me through the first security layer. I searched for any surviving delegate who had been present at the vote to admit humanity 140 years ago. Most of them were long gone. Species have different lifespans, and a century and a half is beyond the reach of most. But there were a few, 3 to be exact. One Krell who had retired into deep meditation and was unreachable. One Heteran, one of my own kind, who had refused all contact since retirement. And one Vasari named Keltur. According to the records, Keltur was still alive. Barely. He was in a hospice facility on a small moon orbiting a neutral trade world, and the medical records attached to his file indicated that he was in the final stages of his life cycle. He had weeks left, perhaps days. I requested a travel pass the next morning, citing historical research. Melnick signed it without looking up from his work. I think he had already decided that I was going to do this, and that stopping me would only delay the inevitable. "Be careful," he said as I left, "and when you come back, if you come back, do not tell me what you learned." I promised him I would not. Then I booked passage on the next transport out, and I began the journey that would change the way I understood the universe forever. The hospice was a quiet place, all soft lighting and muted walls, staffed by gentle beings from a caretaker species, whose entire culture revolved around easing the transition of the dying. They led me through long, curving corridors to a small private room at the end of a wing, reserved for guests with special circumstances. Keltur lay on a low platform, covered in a thin blanket of woven fibers. His skin, which should have been the deep purple of a healthy Vasari, had faded to a pale lavender. His breathing was shallow. His eyes, when they opened, were clear. "You are Hedarin," he said. His voice was dry but steady. "Young, protocol officer by the cut of your robe, come to ask about the humans." I was startled. "How did you know?" He almost smiled. "Because every few decades someone like you comes, young, curious, unable to let it rest, and every time I turn them away. But I am dying now, and the rules of my silence end with my life. Sit down." I sat on the small stool beside his platform. I took out my recorder, then hesitated. "No recording," he said. "What I tell you, you carry in your own memory or not at all." I put the recorder away. Keltur was quiet for a long moment, gathering his strength. Then he began to speak, and as he spoke, the world I thought I understood began to come apart. 140 years ago, he said, humanity did not apply to join the council. They were summoned to stand before it. Do you understand the difference? They were being judged. They were being answered to. The council had done something to them, and the time had come to account for it. I did not understand. The Conquered did not interfere with unaffiliated worlds. That was one of its oldest principles. The non-interference doctrine. No species could be contacted, controlled, or interfered with until they had developed the technology to leave their own star system and approach the council on their own terms. Keltur saw my confusion. He continued. "There was a species, long before you were hatched, called the Veshran. They were old, older than most member species. They considered themselves the gentle guardians of the galaxy, the wise elders who knew what was best for the younger races. Do you know what the Veshran did when they discovered Earth?" "No." "They found it early. Humanity had only just developed atomic fission. They were still confined to their home planet. They had not even walked on their own moon yet. The veteran decided in their wisdom that this young species was too dangerous to be allowed to develop freely. So they did what they believed was the civilized thing. They did not attack. They did not invade. They placed a quarantine field around the solar system. My thorax tightened. A blockade. A blockade, silent, invisible. Humanity never knew it was there. But it stopped any outside contact, any outside resources, any outside help. And then the veterans sat back and watched. For 60 years they watched. They reported to the council that humanity was contained, managed, a problem, they said, that had been peacefully solved. And the council allowed this. The council approved it, unanimously. Every species voted yes, including mine, including yours. I felt sick. The non-interference doctrine was the foundation of the conquered. It was supposed to be sacred. And yet every member species had voted to break it, to cage a young species and watch them struggle in isolation. What happened to humanity during those 60 years? Kelter closed his eyes. What happens to any intelligent species that suddenly finds its growth cut off, that cannot expand, cannot reach the resources it needs, cannot progress the way its population is growing to demand? They did what any trapped species would do. They turned on each other. They fought over the resources of a single world that was never meant to hold so many for so long. They suffered. For 60 years, they suffered in ways we did not have the courage to watch directly. We only read the reports. And then in the 61st year, the blockade broke. The veteran lifted it. No, Kelter opened his eyes. Humanity broke it from the inside. They should not have been able to. Their technology was supposed to be a century behind what was needed to even detect the blockade, let alone pierce it. But they had spent 60 years studying the gaps in it. 60 years of their best minds trying to understand why the stars seemed wrong, why certain signals never came, why the universe felt closed. And one day a ship came through. Just one. A small human vessel, crude by our standards, carrying 3 representatives. And they came to the council. They came to the veteran first. Kelter's breathing grew more labored. He took a moment to steady himself. No one knows exactly what the humans said to the veteran homeworld. There are no recordings. The veteran did not share the details. But within 3 months of that first contact, every veteran on every world had quietly stopped functioning. They did not fight. They did not flee. They simply withdrew. They stopped eating. They stopped working. They stopped speaking. One by one, world by world, the veteran civilization ended itself. The humans did that to them. No, the humans did nothing to them. That is what makes it terrible. I stared at him. I do not understand. Go to the veteran homeworld, young one. It is sealed, but your clearance as a protocol officer may be enough to access it if you are careful. Go there. See what the humans left behind, and then you will understand. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Kelter looked at me with those clear old eyes. Because in all the decades I have watched the humans walk into the council unarmed, I have never once seen them carry themselves like conquerors. They do not boast. They do not threaten. They do not even seem proud. They know something about themselves that we are all too frightened to know about them. And someone, eventually, has to be brave enough to understand what they know. Perhaps that someone is you. He closed his eyes. I thought he had fallen asleep, but then he spoke one more time very softly. There is a phrase the humans use among themselves when they think no one is listening. I heard it once, many years ago, from a human diplomat who did not know I spoke their tongue. He said, "The day we decide we need weapons is the day the galaxy should start saying goodbye." Remember that. Remember it when you walk the empty cities of the veteran. I left the hospice that evening with those words circling my mind like a warning I could not yet understand. Kelter passed into the final stage of his life cycle 3 days later. I was already halfway to the veteran system by then, my protocol clearance active, my questions burning, my fear growing with every jump through the dark. The veteran homeworld had been designated memorial class, restricted for 139 years. Only a handful of beings had visited it in all that time, and most of them had been maintenance drones sent to keep the automated systems functioning. No living ambassador had walked its surface since the humans first arrived there, until me. I piloted my small survey craft down through a silent atmosphere. The scanners showed perfect environmental conditions, temperature optimal, oxygen mixture stable, no contaminants, no radiation, no signs of conflict, no signs of damage. I landed in the central plaza of the planetary capital, stepped out of my craft and began to walk. My instruments told me I was safe. My instincts told me I had entered a tomb. The city was beautiful. I want you to understand that because everything else I am going to tell you will sound strange, and the strangeness begins with the beauty. The Veshran had built their capital from pale blue stone, with flowing curved architecture that seemed to grow out of the ground rather than sit upon it. The streets were wide. The gardens were full of flowering plants that still bloomed, tended by automated irrigation systems that had run for more than a century without maintenance. Birds, or whatever the Veshran equivalent was, flew overhead. Small creatures moved through the underbrush. The world was alive. But the Veshran were gone. I walked through empty shops with goods still on the shelves. I passed through markets where automated vendor stalls continued to operate, offering fresh produce to customers who would never come. I entered a residential building. The door opened for me automatically, recognizing my biological presence. Inside a home, furniture in place, clothing folded neatly in cabinets. A meal preserved by climate control sat on the dining table, 3 place settings, plates still clean. Utensils arranged with care. No bodies, no signs of struggle, nothing disturbed. Just an empty home, waiting for a family that had decided, 140 years ago, not to come back to the table. I walked out of that home with my 3 eyes blurring. I continued through the city. Every building told the same story. Schools with datapads still on the desks. Hospitals with patient beds made up and waiting. Parks with children's toys set down neatly on the grass. A planet of 1.5 billion Veshran according to the old census. All of them gone. All of their cities still standing. All of their things still in place. I made my way to the Veshran High Council building. It stood at the center of the capital, a tall, graceful tower of pale stone, and its doors opened for me as if they had been waiting. Inside, the central chamber was shaped like a wide bowl, with seats arranged in rings around a central platform. I climbed down to the platform. There was a control panel there, preserved and functional. I activated it, and a holographic record began to play. It was the Veshran Prime Minister, an older female Veshran with silver markings on her face. She was sitting in the empty chamber speaking to no one. Her voice was calm, tired, almost gentle. "If anyone ever hears this," she said, "I want you to know that the humans did not destroy us. I want that clearly understood. They did not attack us. They did not use any weapon against us. They did not even raise their voices." She paused, she took a breath. 3 humans came to our world 6 weeks ago. We had expected them. We had prepared a reception. We thought they would be angry. We thought they would demand justice or reparations or revenge. We were ready for all of those responses. We had rehearsed our apologies. We had planned our offers of restoration. We believed that a species subjected to what we had subjected them to would arrive with fury, and we were prepared to meet that fury with grace. But they did not come with fury. They came with photographs, with recordings, with stories. They sat across from us in this very chamber and they showed us what the blockade had done. They showed us the children, they showed us the mothers. They showed us what 60 years of forced isolation does to a young and growing species. They did not accuse us. They did not even seem angry. They simply showed us. And they asked us very politely if we had known. We had known. Of course we had known. We had always known. We had simply told ourselves that we were being wise, that we were being gentle, that what we were doing was for the good of all. The Prime Minister's voice trembled for the first time. We had built our entire civilization on the idea that we were the good ones, the civilized ones, the wise stewards of the galaxy. It was the core of who we were, our philosophy, our religion, our history, our pride. We were the species who did not do terrible things. We were the species who knew better. The humans sat in this chamber for 3 hours. They did not raise their voices. They did not threaten. They simply told us with their pictures and their recordings and their quiet words exactly what we had done. And they asked us again and again a single question. They asked us, how do you live with this? We did not have an answer. We searched our philosophy. We searched our religion. We searched our history. There was no answer, because our entire identity was built on being the species who would never need to answer such a question. When the humans left our chamber that evening, they thanked us for our time. They were polite. They bowed slightly. They returned to their ship and they went home. They did not threaten us. They did not demand anything. They simply left. Within a week, the first of us had stopped eating. The Prime Minister paused again, a long silence. When she continued, her voice was very soft. It is not a weapon. That is what I want you to understand. There is no weapon. There is only the truth. And the truth for a species like ours turns out to be unsurvivable. We had built ourselves on a lie, and when the lie was taken away, there was nothing underneath. I watched my own hands refuse to lift food to my mouth. I watch my own mind refuse to find reasons to continue. I know what is happening to me. I know why, and I cannot stop it. The humans did not kill us. We are killing ourselves because we cannot live with what we have done, and we cannot pretend we did not do it because they refuse to let us pretend anymore. That is all they did. They refused to let us lie to ourselves, and that, for us, was the end. She looked directly into the recorder. To whoever finds this, whoever you are, whatever species you belong to, understand this about the humans. They did not come to us with power. They came to us with a mirror, and they held it up and they waited and they let us see. Do not cage them again. Do not isolate them. Do not hurt them. Not because they will hurt you back, but because they will show you yourself exactly as you are, and some of you will not survive the seeing. The recording ended. I stood in that empty chamber, on that empty platform, in that empty city, on that empty world. The only sounds were the soft hum of the automated systems and the distant calls of birds in the abandoned gardens. I understood then why the file had been sealed. I understood why every species in the council had voted unanimously to hide what had happened. It was not shame, though there was shame in it. It was not fear, though there was fear in it. It was something deeper. It was the knowledge that a new kind of species had entered the galaxy. A species that did not conquer with fleets. A species that did not dominate with technology. A species that studied and remembered and waited, and when the time came, simply held up the truth and let it do the work. I thought about my own species, about the vote we had cast 140 years ago to approve the Veshran blockade. I thought about what would happen if 3 humans came to our homeworld one day and sat across from our leaders and showed us, quietly, the photographs of what that vote had helped to cause. I wondered if we would survive it. I made my way back to my ship with my legs shaking. I lifted off from the Veshran homeworld and set my course back to Concord Station. I did not speak for the entire journey. I did not eat. I barely slept. I kept replaying the Prime Minister's words in my head over and over. They came to us with a mirror. By the time I reached Concord Station, I had made a decision. I was going to file no report. I was going to leave my research unfinished. I was going to do what Melnick had warned me to do from the beginning and simply bury what I had learned. But someone else had other plans. The moment I docked, a message appeared on my personal terminal. A meeting request, private, secure, scheduled for that same evening. The sender was one of the human delegates, the woman, the one who had stood up in the chamber and said 11 words and sat back down. She wanted to speak with me. I read the message 3 times. My hands were trembling. I thought about refusing. I thought about requesting reassignment to a remote posting. I thought about leaving the service entirely. I thought about running. But I remembered what Kelter had said. Someone, eventually, has to be brave enough to understand what they know. I accepted the meeting. The meeting room she had chosen was not a formal chamber. It was a small, quiet room on one of the middle levels of the station, furnished simply, with 2 chairs, a low table, and a viewport that looked out at the slow-turning stars. When I arrived, she was already there. She had prepared a pot of something steaming on the table, 2 small cups. She smiled when she saw me, and the smile was kind. "Please," she said, "sit. I hope you like tea. It is a custom from my world." I sat. My claws were shaking too badly to lift the cup, so I left it on the table. She did not seem to mind. She poured tea for herself and sipped it slowly. "I understand you have been asking questions," she said. "Yes," my voice was small. "And you visited the Veshran homeworld?" "Yes." She nodded. She did not seem angry. She did not seem threatening. She looked, if anything, a little sad. "How long have you been a protocol officer?" she asked. 3 years. "And how old are you, in your species terms?" "Young, not yet middle-aged." She nodded again. "You are curious. That is a good quality. Most beings are not curious. Most beings accept what they are told and never ask what lies underneath. The galaxy has a lot of incurious beings, and that is how terrible things happen without anyone noticing until it is far too late." She set down her cup. "I know what you saw on the Veshran homeworld. I know what Kelter told you. I know what you have been reading in the sealed files. I want you to understand that no one is angry with you. No one is going to punish you for what you have learned. In fact, I requested this meeting because I think you deserve to hear the rest of it. From one of us." The rest of it. The part that is not in the sealed files. The part that Kelter did not know. The part that only humans know about what happened 140 years ago. I did not know what to say. She smiled again. "You are wondering why we tell no one. Why we let the galaxy believe what it wants to believe. Why we sit quietly in the council chamber and say very little and carry no weapons. There is a reason for all of it. Would you like to hear?" I nodded. I could not trust myself to speak. She sat back in her chair and looked out at the stars. "When we broke the Veshran blockade, there were many of us who wanted revenge. You have to understand that. We are not angels. We are not some ancient, enlightened species. We are a young people, and we had suffered for 60 years because of what the Veshran had done to us. Many of our leaders, when we first made contact, wanted to strike back. They wanted our ships to burn the Veshran worlds. They wanted justice in the form of fire. But we had spent 60 years in the dark. 60 years without contact, without trade, without outside help. And in those 60 years, something strange had happened to us. We had studied. We had thought. We had looked at each other and at ourselves, and we had asked what we wanted to become when the darkness finally ended. Because we knew, somehow, that the darkness would end one day. And we did not want to emerge from it as the same species that had entered it. So when the blockade broke and our first ship reached the Veshran, we did not go with fleets. We did not go with weapons. We went with 3 people, a diplomat, a historian, and a grandmother who had lost 4 of her children during the worst of the resource wars. We chose her because she had every reason to hate the Veshran, and yet when we asked her what she wanted to say to them, she said only, "I want them to understand." That was what we brought, 3 people, photographs, recordings, stories, and a single question: how do you live with this? What happened next, the Veshran could not answer. Their civilization unmade itself. Not because we wanted it to. We did not want that. We were horrified when it happened. We are still horrified. To this day, we tend the Veshran worlds as memorials. We maintain their gardens. We keep their automated systems running. We do not let their civilization be forgotten. Because whatever they did to us, what happened to them afterward was not what we were asking for. We were only asking them to see. She turned back to me. Her eyes were very clear. But the galaxy saw what happened, and the galaxy drew a conclusion. The galaxy decided that we were a terrible new kind of danger, a species that could undo civilizations without firing a single shot. The council convened in emergency session. They voted, all of them unanimously, to admit us to the conquered immediately, and to seal the records of what had happened forever. They did this because they were afraid. They were afraid that if other young species learned what we had done, they might try to do it too. And most young species do not have the discipline to use such a method responsibly. So we agreed to the seal. We agreed to carry no weapons into the council chamber, as a permanent visible sign that we had no hostile intent. We agreed to speak rarely, to vote simply, to remain quiet members of the galactic community. And in return, the galaxy agreed never to test us. That is the arrangement. That is what you have been reading in the sealed files. That is what Kelter was trying to tell you. I finally found my voice. But why do they step aside? Why does Voron, the Sergeant at Arms, lower his eyes when you pass? You have given your word, you carry no weapons. What are they afraid of? She smiled very gently, very sadly. They are afraid of what would happen if the arrangement ever broke. They are afraid of the day we decide that quiet speech and unarmed presence are no longer enough. They are afraid that somewhere, someone in the galaxy is doing what the Veshran did, hiding it, thinking they are being wise, thinking they know better, and they are afraid that one day we will find out and we will come to visit them as we came to visit the Veshran. And every species on the council, without exception, has things in their history they would not want held up to a mirror. I understood then. I understood completely. The humans were not feared for their weapons. They were feared for their patience, for their memory, for their willingness to sit quietly in a room and wait for years if they had to, until the moment came when the truth had to be spoken, and for the knowledge that when that moment came, they would not raise their voices. They would simply hold up the mirror, and no species in the galaxy was certain they would survive the seeing. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "If the arrangement requires silence, why have you told me everything?" "Because you went looking. Because you are young and curious and you did not stop when you were warned. Because in every generation a few beings like you come close to the truth, and we make a choice about what to do with them. Most of them we let find their own way back to silence. But occasionally one of them is different. Occasionally one of them is the kind of being who could carry the truth without being broken by it. And we make contact with those." "Why?" "Because the arrangement cannot last forever. Because one day the galaxy will need more than silence from us. It will need partnership, real partnership. And for that, there need to be beings in every species who know the truth and who have chosen freely to help us build something better than the arrangement we have now. We are always looking for those beings. You are one." I stared at her. "I am just a protocol officer." "Yes," she said, "and that is exactly the kind of person who changes history, not the generals, not the ambassadors, the ones who take notes, the ones who keep records, the ones who remember." She stood up. The meeting was ending. "You do not have to decide anything today. You do not have to do anything at all. I am only asking you to carry what you know. Carry it carefully. Speak of it to no one who has not earned the right to hear it. And if, one day, you find yourself in a position to use it, I trust you will use it well." "What if I make a mistake?" I asked. "What if I tell the wrong being?" She considered the question. "Then you will learn as we learn that the truth is a heavy thing and it must be carried with care. But I do not think you will make that mistake. You waited to speak until you understood. That tells me enough." She walked to the door. Before she left, she paused. "One more thing. You asked why we walk into the council chamber unarmed. The real answer is simple. A weapon is for a being you consider your equal in the capacity for harm. The day we carry a weapon into that chamber is the day we have decided that one of the other species has reached that level. And every species in that chamber knows, quietly, deep in their oldest memories, that none of them want us to ever decide that. Our empty hands are not humility. They are not peace. They are a promise. A promise that we still believe there are better ways to handle our disagreements than the way we handled the Veshran, and a warning that the promise, like all promises, has limits. She bowed slightly, a human gesture of respect. I rose, and I returned the bow, an insected approximation of the same gesture. She left. I sat alone in the small, quiet room for a long time afterward, watching the stars turn slowly through the viewport, feeling the weight of everything I now carried. The next day, I returned to my duties. I filed my sealed research as an empty report. I told Melnick that I had found nothing of interest. He looked at me for a long moment, and I think he understood. He nodded once and turned back to his work. The next council session was called 3 days later. I was assigned to document it, as I had been assigned to document every session since I took this post. I arrived early. I set up my recording equipment. I watched the delegates file in. The humans arrived last, as they always did. 3 of them, the same woman, the 2 men I did not know. They walked in carrying nothing. Voron stepped aside. The chamber fell into that old familiar quiet. But this time, I watched with different eyes. I saw the Krell general keep his gaze fixed on the floor, and I remembered that the Krell had voted yes on the blockade 140 years ago. I saw the Vasari speaker's hands tremble slightly, and I remembered that the Vasari had voted yes as well. I saw the Drathan delegation angle their chairs away, and I remembered that the Drathan had supplied technical assistance to the Veshran during the blockade years. I saw my own Heteran ambassador, and I remembered that my own species had voted yes, along with everyone else. Every being in that chamber had a secret. Every species had something in their history that they did not want held up to the light. And the humans knew. The humans always knew. They had spent a century and a half quietly reading the records, studying the histories, listening to the private speeches, remembering every vote and every decision and every quiet moment when each species had chosen convenience over justice. They were not threatening us with what they might do. They were simply sitting in the room, reminding us that they were watching, remembering, and willing, if they ever decided it was necessary, to hold up the mirror. The session proceeded. The humans voted simply. They spoke rarely. When they spoke, every being in the chamber listened with absolute attention, because every being in the chamber knew that the day the humans had something difficult to say was the day the arrangement ended. And the day the arrangement ended was the day the quiet century and a half of peace came to its close. At the end of the session, the human woman caught my 3 eyes across the chamber. She inclined her head just slightly. I returned the gesture. No one else in the room saw us. No one else noticed. But in that small, silent exchange, I became something I had not been before. I became a being who knew. A being who had seen the empty cities and heard the dying diplomat and sat across from the quiet human woman and understood. I was a keeper of the truth now, one of a small number across the galaxy in every species who had been chosen to carry what we knew until the day it was needed. I did not know then what that day would look like or when it would come. I do not know now. It may come in my lifetime. It may come long after I am gone. But when it comes, there will be beings ready. Beings who understand that the humans are not our enemies. They are not our rulers. They are something stranger and rarer and more difficult than either. They are our witnesses. They are the memory the galaxy could not keep for itself. They are the mirror we agreed in our shame to let them hold. And so when you ask why the humans walk into the council chamber unarmed, and why no one dares to question it, you now know the answer. It is not because they are weak. It is not because they are peaceful. It is not because they are better than the rest of us. It is because they have chosen, for now, to believe that we can still become something worth not showing a mirror to. And the day they decide otherwise will be a day none of us wish to see. In the Conquered, we say that a delegate bears the honor of their people in the weapons they carry. The humans bear theirs in the weapons they have chosen, forever, not to. And the weight of that choice, carried quietly by three small beings in plain dark clothing walking into a chamber full of warlords and generals, is heavier than any blade, any gun, any fleet of ships the galaxy has ever known. I know this now, I carry it, and one day perhaps I will hold up the mirror myself, to my own people, to my own leaders, to my own history, because that is what the humans taught us without ever saying it aloud, that the bravest thing any species can do is look at itself honestly without flinching and accept what it sees. The humans do it every day. That is their real secret. That is the source of their strength. They have learned to live with the mirror, and they are waiting patiently to see if the rest of us can learn too. I think we can, I hope we can, and if we cannot, then the humans will do what they have always done. They will sit quietly in the chamber. They will carry no weapons. They will say very little, and they will wait. They have all the time in the universe. We do not.